Really, I got no problem with any of it. They falling like Adam, I had to get above it. I need nobody,
You're listening to Mitch's 영어 audio podcast. This is the official audio podcast companion to Mitch's 영어 application, as well as Mitch's daily English Naver blog and Facebook page. Improving your English listening skills one podcast at a time.
I don't need it. Screw your click, and your meeting. Boy, I'm hungry, and you eating, and yeah, I want it. But that ain't Jesus. Pick up a bag to go.
It's the week of Friday, May 24th, 2019. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my podcast. My name's Mitch. This is my podcast, Mitch's 영어, and this is where we talk about things in English, 100% English all the time, all English for you to improve your English listening skills, which, as I've said many times, will help you with your speaking skills and all English skills. It all comes from listening. Listen as much as you can. That's why I have this podcast every Friday. It comes out for you to be able to kind of summarize, wrap up what we talked about on the blog. And my blog is Mitch's Daily English. You can find it on Naver or Google search it, Mitch's Daily English. There you can follow me every day throughout the week, Monday through Friday. I post about different things, whether it's about English, grammar or phrases, things like that. Or sometimes I post about movies. Sometimes I post about TV shows, music, just interesting news or videos that I've seen on YouTube, just anything that people are talking about in culture, in pop culture right now. These are things that I recommend to you so that you can improve your English. It will help you with listening skills, again, because lots and lots of listening helps. And also things that people are talking about. So if you are meeting with native English speakers, these are things that they might talk about, they might know about. These are reference points. We call it reference point. A reference point, a point of reference is another way to say it. When you have something with someone else, you're having a conversation and you have no point of reference, that just means, like for example, one time I remember I have some friends, I haven't seen them for a long time, not that long, but we meet like once a year, like those kind of friends. We used to hang out all the time. We were always together. And then these days we're all busy, so we hang out like once a year. And so I remember I met with them. I was really excited. We're going to hang out. It's going to be fun, like old times. And then these guys were talking about baseball for about an hour. And they kept coming back to talking about baseball. And okay, if you know me and you've listened to this podcast, I'm not really a sports guy. I don't know a lot about sports. I don't care about sports. Sports is not that interesting to me. I don't understand why people are so into it. I can, if it's on TV and people are watching it, I can watch it and be somewhat entertained, but I don't care about the players or the teams or who's going to win. Like, to me, it doesn't matter. They could all win for all I care. They could all lose. I don't really care. But these guys were talking about baseball, and they just kept, talking about all different things about baseball, players, teams, all this stuff that I just did not understand. I didn't care about. I had no point of reference. Okay, that's what we talk about. When you have no point of reference, it means you're in a conversation and you just can't relate. You can't understand what they're talking about, and you can't jump in. It's not really a language problem. This doesn't have to do with the fact that your English is not good. This just means you don't have anything in common with the other person, anything to talk about. And so that's why on this podcast I try to give you things that maybe could be a point of reference. Now, it's not 100% certain, right? Okay, I don't talk about some points of reference that are very huge, like, for example, Game of Thrones. Everybody's talking about Game of Thrones, and I don't talk about that on this podcast. Why? Well, probably because you already know about Game of Thrones. Okay, so those big ones, I don't feel like I need to talk about, like Avengers. I don't recommend movies like Avengers on this podcast because those are points of reference that you already know about. If you're going to be into Avengers, then you've probably already seen it. You know the ending. I'm not going to spoil it for you, okay? But these kind of things that I recommend on this podcast and on my blog are reference points that a lot of Western people know about. These are music and movies and TV shows that Western people know about, but Koreans don't necessarily know about. They're not that popular in Korea. And so I like to recommend those because if you have a conversation with a native English speaker, maybe you can talk about Avengers, Game of Thrones. Probably that's a very good reference point. But it's good to have others, other things that you can grab onto in a conversation. For example, if you're talking to somebody and they're really into hip-hop music, last week I played some hip-hop music on the blog. I put some on the blog, so you could talk about that. And that was a new artist. That's a brand new artist. And so those kinds of things, I like to give you those recommendations. That's what we do on this blog. So if you're new to this podcast, that's what's happening. That's what's going on. It's different. It's not like any other podcast you've ever heard for English education. It's different. And some people might not understand why it's different. But I promise you, if you follow the blog, if you listen to this podcast, if you check out all of those reference points that I mention, and you keep up with it all, your English is going to improve. And you're going to find when you meet native English speakers, you're going to have a lot of things to talk about. Lots of things to talk about. You're going to have plenty of topics for small talk and discussion, which is what most of conversation is, okay? There are, of course, deeper things to talk about, not just TV shows and movies. Of course, there are many things in life that we want. When you want to have a real conversation, okay, that's kind of a next level step. Now, if you want to get to that level of English where you're really able to have a good conversation, a deep conversation with native English speakers, well, I recommend my application, Mitch's Michin 영어. You can download it to your PC or phone, and there you can you get access to all of this stuff that I'm talking about, my blog, YouTube channel, my podcast, all of it's there for free. And then if you become a subscriber, a monthly subscriber, you can get access to all hours and hours and hours of video lessons that I teach. And I teach you conversational-based, dialogue-based English, okay? So in other words, these are phrases, these are topical-based things that people, for real conversations that native English speakers have. And that will help you if you want to go deeper in conversation and you don't want to always just talk about movies or TV shows. You want to talk about deeper things. Well, that might help you because there's a lot of good phrases there for you and just a lot of topics that every lesson is a different topic. So check that out at mitchininenglish.com. You can download it and you can see all the information there about that. You can sample some of the videos, try it out. All right. Well, how's everybody doing? It is nice outside. Have you been outside? Have you been outside this week? This week was amazing. The weather was great. It was so sunny and the air is clean finally. Can you believe it? For so long, it seemed like at the beginning of this year, the air was so dirty for weeks and weeks at a time. And then the last couple weeks, it's been so beautiful and so clear. I miss that. I miss it. It feels like when I first came to Korea, well, for up until about 5 years ago, fall time in Korea was like this. They had this clear blue skies, no misemanji, no yellow dust, no anything. It was just clear air, and the air is not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just perfect. Well, that's what's going on right now in Korea, and it's great. I love it. I hope it stays this way for the whole summer. I'm sure it won't. Okay, it's probably going to get real hot real soon, but let's enjoy it while we can. Get outside, try to get some sunshine, get some fresh air while it's still fresh, before the humidity comes. Humidity. Do you know humidity? 습기. Yeah, that is something that's coming soon. So before that comes, let's go outside right now while it's still nice and crisp. The air is, we describe this kind of air as crisp. It's fresh. It's not, it doesn't feel too humid. It doesn't feel too cold, too hot. It's just nice. It's perfect weather. I love this kind of weather. So let's do it. Let's enjoy it. Let's go outside. But first, let's get into some entertainment reviews.
And you're meeting, boy, I'm hungry. And you eating, and yeah, I want it. But that ain't Jesus. I be though, pick up a bag to go. Uber the head to though, I'm active, oh. Run for the man, so oh. Hop in the alley, bro, don't have me, bro. Thinking you had me, whoa. Feel like a candy coat, and reload. You need a bandy, though. I come in handy, though. All in my bag, don't give a if you mad. I'm in the school of hard knocks and at the top of my class. And my abode is translucent while you
Well, I saw a show recently. It's a drama, and I recommended it on the blog. It's on Netflix. You can see it. It's called Unsolved, and it is it's a reenactment of a real historical situation that happened when I was younger, and I remember it very clearly because this was like the time when I was a teenager or in university, that time in the late 90s. There is this historical, cultural thing that everybody in America knows about and all over the world knows about. And this is in hip-hop culture, there was kind of a battle between East Coast and West Coast. East Coast hip-hop was from New York, New York, and there was a lot of music coming out of New York in that style, and then there was another style of hip-hop that came out in LA. And this East Coast West Coast rivalry started off kind of just as a little thing, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. We call that it's snowballed. It's snowballed. That's a phrase we use for something that just keeps growing and growing, gets out of control real fast. So these artists and these companies, there are a couple record companies that were involved in this feud, and they were arguing and they were upset. And then the rappers, Biggie Smalls was one of them from New York, and Tupac from LA, and you've probably heard of Tupac for sure. Both of them very, very famous rappers. They were rapping about this feud and this argument as well in their songs, and it just grew and grew, and then the media took it and it got out of control, and pretty soon gangs were involved. There was a lot of gang violence in LA and New York, and these two rival gangs, they're called the Crips and the Bloods, they got involved in this feud, and then before you know it, it was out of control, and both Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur were dead. They were both killed by drive-by shootings, and until this day, even now, those two crimes have never been solved. Nobody has figured out who killed Tupac. Nobody has figured out who killed Biggie. And it's just this thing that exists in American hip-hop culture, and everybody remembers it. Everybody, it was a big, big thing. Okay, and that's what this show is about. And this show is a recreation of those times. And the thing I like about this show is that it shows you three different perspectives. Okay, first of all, it shows you from Biggie and Tupac's perspective, the whole story from their lives in the early 1990s, from like 1993 to 96. That time when they were friends, they started off as friends actually, and it shows that friendship, and then how the friendship kind of grew apart, and how this whole situation that I just talked about kind of got out of control, snowballed. It shows that perspective. That's part of it. And then there's another perspective in the show where it shows there's a detective, a police officer who was investigating Biggie's murder after it happened, and this was in 1997, around there. And this guy was very famous because he was kind of accusing a lot of LA police officers of being involved. His theory was that it wasn't just gangs, that the LA police were involved in these murders. And of course, that you can imagine that didn't make him very popular, so he got fired. He got in a lot of trouble for that. And that's another story in this drama. And then the other perspective, the other story they tell is another police officer 10 years later, in 2006, they reopened the investigation because Biggie's mom was suing the city of LA for, I think, $140 million or something like that. So because they were going to have to pay all this money, they opened up a new investigation to try to solve the murder. And so that investigation that happened in 2006 is quite interesting as well. And the way they do this is that those three stories, they weave them in and out. Weave them, like a basket, the basket weaving or hair braiding. That's what we say, weaving That means you have 3 different strings, and you kind of tie them together, overlapping, and they go back and forth between these 3 storylines. And it's a very interesting way to do it. It seems like it would be confusing, but it works very well. I liked it a lot. The actors did a great job. The actors who played Biggie and Tupac, they look like them, they act like them. It's just a really, really great documentary and a very interesting, fascinating story. So let's listen to the trailer.
Biggie was 24 when he was killed. Tupac was 25. Kids, man.
Maybe I'm foolish, maybe I'm blind, thinking I can see through this and see what's behind.
You're going to try to find out who really killed the notorious B.I.G.
There is a very real possibility that the murder of Biggie Smalls is directly related to the murder of Tupac.
I'm only human.
People's lives are getting destroyed. It has to stop.
Blame on me.
It's my objective to solve this case or cover the department's ass.
I'm only human.
My son Christopher and Tupac were friends. Look, I got you.
What if it was a white celebrity who got shot?
For us not to make an arrest, it's embarrassing. This case is legendary.
I'm only human. After all, don't put the blame on me.